He looked me dead in the eyes that morning, leaning back in his leather chair like a king guarding his throne. "We don't hire losers like you," he spat, voice dripping with contempt. His grin was so confident, so certain it almost made me laugh. Almost. "My name is Natalie. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever had someone bury you alive in their low expectations?" I stood there, holding my resume, trying to keep my hands steady. I'd worn my best navy suit, tried to hide the years of disappointment stitched into my skin. I'd practiced every answer, every greeting, all to stand in front of a man who already decided I was worthless before I spoke. "My brother-in-law." He leaned forward, savoring every word. "I'm protecting the company, Natalie. We can't have embarrassments ruining our image." I nodded once, calm as glass. "I understand perfectly." He laughed, waving me off like a beggar at his gate. "Good. Now, get out of my office." So I did. I walked out, my heartbeat rattling against my ribs, shame trying to drown me. But underneath that shame, something else pulsed. A cold, bright rage I hadn't felt in years. He thought he could bury me with those words. He thought he could carve failure into my bones and I'd accept it. He didn't know I'd been preparing for this moment for months. That I'd had my own interviews, my own contracts, my own silent, vicious climb waiting behind closed doors. That night, I barely slept. The city buzzed beyond my window, neon lights smearing against the glass like war paint. Tomorrow would change everything. The next morning, he arrived at the same gleaming building, swaggering through the lobby in his $1,000 suit, ready to crush someone else's dreams. But the receptionist rose from her desk, voice tight with nerves. "Sir, the new Director General would like to see you immediately." He frowned, confused. "Director General? We don't have a—" And then he saw me, standing in the glass office above him, watching through the window. My name etched on the door in bold letters. Director General. His face turned a shade I'd never seen before, somewhere between disbelief and pure, raw terror. And in that single, perfect second, I felt every insult he'd ever thrown at me burn to ash. He stormed up the marble stairs, each step echoing like a funeral bell. His face was a perfect mask of disbelief and panic, cracking around the edges as he tried to hold on to the illusion of control. I stood behind the director's desk, my desk, calm and unshaken, letting the silence swallow him whole. "Natalie," he choked, voice brittle. "What the hell is this?" I rested my hands lightly on the polished wood. "Sit," I said. He hesitated, thrown by how steady I sounded, how completely unafraid I looked. I said, "Sit." He dropped into the chair, the same one I'd occupied as a trembling applicant only a day ago. His eyes darted around, searching for a lifeline. None came. I took a slow breath, letting every second stretch out, letting him taste the humiliation I'd carried for years. "Yesterday," I began, "you told me losers had no place here." He swallowed hard, the color draining from his face. "Well," I continued, measured and sharp, "you were half right. Losers don't belong here." He tried to cut in, to salvage even a shred of power. "You can't." I raised my hand, silencing him with a look so cold it could have shattered glass. "From this moment on," I said, each word slicing him open, "I'm in charge. You answer to me. Every report, every approval, every deal comes across this desk." He gaped at me, his mouth working, no words forming. "And let me make one thing very clear," I added, leaning in so he could see the steel in my eyes. "You will never speak to me the way you did yesterday. Not here, not ever." The muscles in his jaw twitched, like he wanted to argue but knew there was nothing left to say. I straightened, letting the moment settle, letting him drown in the truth. "You don't get to decide my worth anymore," I told him, voice steady. "I do." A soft knock on the door broke the silence. My new assistant peeked in, respectful, eyes trained on me, not him. "Director General," she said, with a reverence that made my brother-in-law flinch, "the board is ready for your briefing." I nodded. Tell them I'll be there in 5. She closed the door, leaving me alone with the man who once tried to crush me. I let a small, lethal smile slip across my lips. Welcome to the new hierarchy, I told him. Try to keep up. And then I left him sitting there, drowning in the power he once thought was his alone. I stepped into the boardroom with my head held high, every inch of me radiating the authority I had earned in silence. The directors stood, a sea of polished suits and cautious smiles, greeting me with respect that tasted like victory on my tongue. Director General, one of them said, nodding. We're honored to have you. Honored. How many times had I starved for that word? I took my seat at the head of the table, my place now, and let the hush settle. My brother-in-law slipped in behind me, trying to blend into the shadows, but the directors noticed him right away. Mr. Hawthorne, one of them said stiffly, you can take the back row. He froze, swallowing humiliation so bitter I could practically smell it. But he obeyed, sinking into a chair at the edge of the room like a child sent to detention. I launched into the strategy I'd spent months building, pouring my heart into each slide, each word, each plan. There was no stammering, no shrinking. Just the quiet, unstoppable truth of who I had become. They listened, eyes sharp, heads nodding, taking notes, asking questions. Not one of them called me a fraud. Not one of them laughed. Halfway through, I caught my brother-in-law's expression, a perfect mix of awe, fear, and disbelief. It was everything I'd fought for, everything I'd bled for in a world that tried to chain me to the floor. I kept going, voice even, breath steady. By the end of the presentation, the entire board broke into applause. It hit me like a warm wave, the recognition I'd been starved of for so long. Brilliant work, one director said. This company is in strong hands. Strong hands.
Mine.
I gathered my notes, meeting their eyes one by one. Thank you, I said, calm and unbowed. From this moment on, there will be no tolerance for arrogance, for dismissing talent, or for disrespect. This company will run on merit and merit alone. A chorus of agreement echoed around the table. My brother-in-law's head hung low, shoulders collapsed, no witty retorts left. As the board members filed out, one paused to whisper, "We've needed someone like you for a long time." I let that sink in. Someone like me. I turned, letting my brother-in-law see every inch of my triumph. "Any questions, Mr. Hawthorne?" asked cool and clear. He shook his head, broken, defeated. "Good," I said softly. "Then get to work." Because this was my empire now. And no one would ever call me a loser again. The boardroom emptied, leaving behind only a faint echo of applause and the scent of burnt coffee. My brother-in-law lingered by the window, shoulders hunched, staring out over the city, like a man trying to find an escape route. I walked toward him, heels tapping against the marble with a rhythm that felt like a war drum. He turned, eyes bloodshot, pride leaking out of him in slow, painful drips. "Natalie," he rasped, "you don't have to do this." I tilted my head, studying him the same way he had studied me, like I was something worthless. "Do what?" "Humiliate me," he pleaded. "We're family, family." The word was poison on his lips. "You humiliated me first," I reminded him, voice as calm as glass. "You made sure I felt smaller than dirt in front of everyone. And now you want forgiveness." He swallowed hard, lips trembling. I didn't know you were qualified," he stammered, looking at the floor. I almost laughed. "Qualified? I was qualified before you ever sat in that chair," I said. "But you couldn't see past your own arrogance." His hands shook. "Please, give me another chance." A part of me wanted to spit back every cruel word he'd ever thrown at me. But another part, the stronger part, decided something worse, to make him earn it. "You'll stay," I said, my voice cutting through the stale air. "And you'll work harder than you ever have in your life.
You will answer to me.
You will respect every employee here. And if I hear even a whisper that you've stepped out of line, you're done. Do you understand?" He nodded, barely breathing. "Say it," I demanded. His voice cracked. "I understand." I let a thin smile play across my lips, the taste of power sweet on my tongue. Good, I said. Because I won't let you destroy anyone the way you tried to destroy me. For a second, I saw him. Not the bully, not the gatekeeper, but a man who'd built his entire identity on belittling others, now crumbling under the weight of someone stronger. I turned away, not giving him another moment of my energy. My phone buzzed with a new email, contracts, partnerships, opportunities. The world was finally opening its doors to me, no longer blocked by his arrogance. As I walked out of the boardroom, I felt the future roll out before me like a red carpet. No more begging. No more shrinking. No more waiting for permission to shine.
I was here to stay.
The next few days moved like a tidal wave, powerful, unstoppable, cleansing every stain my brother-in-law had left behind. I tore through outdated policies, launched new programs, gave chances to people who had been overlooked just like I had. Every decision I made rippled through the building, changing its heartbeat. Employees started smiling at me in the halls, their shoulders lighter, their voices steadier. Word traveled fast. There was a new director general, and she didn't tolerate bullies. My brother-in-law tried to keep his head down, tried to fade into the crowd, but it was too late. The staff remembered how he'd sneered, how he'd mocked people, how he'd shut doors that should have been open. Now, every report he handed me shook in his trembling hands. I reviewed his work, steady and professional. No cruelty in my voice, but no softness, either. "Mr. Hawthorne," I said one afternoon, "you forgot to include the projected figures for next quarter." He swallowed, eyes darting like a cornered animal. "I'll fix it," he mumbled. "Yes," I replied calmly, "you will." The power shift was so complete, even the walls felt different. One day, as I left for a meeting, I noticed the interns chatting in a sunlit corridor, their voices no longer hushed with fear. They were laughing, hopeful. I paused to listen, realizing they were talking about their dreams, their projects, their wild ambitions. And no one was mocking them for it. That moment filled me with something I couldn't name, a kind of hard-won peace that settled deep in my bones. When I got back to my office, Logan, my assistant, handed me a stack of letters. "Messages of support," he explained. "People are grateful for what you're doing." I ran my fingers over the envelopes, stunned. For so long, I'd been the outsider, the nobody, the loser. And now I was the reason people dared to believe again. That night, alone in my penthouse, I stared out at the city, lights shimmering like tiny fires. I promised myself I would protect what I had built, not just for me, but for every voice that had ever been silenced. Tomorrow, I would stand taller. Tomorrow, I would remind him, and everyone else, that my reign wasn't an accident. It was earned, line by line, scar by scar, until there was nothing left to doubt. The following week, I called an all-hands meeting in the atrium, a space that used to feel cold and corporate but now pulsed with something electric. The employees gathered in cautious silence, their eyes trained on me with a mixture of hope and fear. I stepped up to the microphone, the bright lights cutting across my face, and took a deep, calm breath. "My name is Natalie Hawthorne," I began, my voice steady as iron, "and I am the Director General of this company. From today forward, no one here will be made to feel like they don't belong." A ripple moved through the room. Surprise, relief, maybe even a little pride. I scanned the crowd, letting their faces imprint on my memory. "If you have an idea," I continued, "I want to hear it. If you have a dream, I want to help you build it. This place will reward your courage, not punish it." Somewhere near the back, my brother-in-law stood stiff and gray, shrinking behind the interns he once belittled. I let my eyes land on him, only for a heartbeat, just long enough for him to remember exactly who was in control. The applause started soft, almost shy, then grew until it was a thunderclap. I let it wash over me, the sound of an empire reborn. After the meeting, people came up one by one, shaking my hand, thanking me, telling me about the nightmares they'd survived under the old regime. Each story carved itself into my bones, reminding me why I had fought so hard to get here. Later that afternoon, I returned to my office, the sun pouring through the tall glass like a blessing. My brother-in-law hovered in the doorway, hesitant. "May I come in?" he asked, voice small. I nodded, gesturing to the chair across from me. He sat, wringing his hands. "Natalie," he whispered, I'm trying to change." I studied him, seeing for the first time not a monster, but a man built on rotten pride, crushed by his own making. "Change takes time," I said. "And you will be accountable every single day." He nodded, shame thick in the air. I leaned forward, steady. "You built walls. I'm tearing them down. If you want to stay, you help me do it." His eyes filled with something that looked like regret. "Okay," he agreed. I dismissed him gently, a part of me almost feeling sorry for how thoroughly the world had flipped on him. As the door clicked shut behind him, I looked around my office, my empire, and let a quiet, dangerous smile bloom across my face. This was only the beginning, and they hadn't seen anything yet. The weeks rolled forward, each day carving new victories into the marble of that building. I signed contracts my brother-in-law had never been bold enough to dream of, brought in partners who valued integrity, and crushed every whisper of corruption that still clung to the corners. I could feel the culture shifting. Employees who used to avoid eye contact now stood taller, their voices steadier, their creativity on fire. The heartbeat of the company changed, and with it, my own sense of belonging finally felt real. One morning, Logan came in with a report that nearly made me laugh. "He's thriving," he said carefully, handing me the numbers. My brother-in-law, the man who once tried to bury me, had become one of my strongest lieutenants, working tirelessly to prove he wasn't the villain anymore. "He's trying hard," Logan added, shrugging. I skimmed the report, finding no errors, no manipulations, just solid, consistent effort. It felt strange, seeing him transform under the same rules he'd once mocked. People can change, I thought, if they're forced to look in the mirror long enough. That afternoon, we had another board meeting. I stepped in, confident, commanding, the director general everyone had learned not to question. My brother-in-law sat at the side table, quiet, focused, no longer a tyrant, but a man reborn. I delivered quarterly results that shattered every ceiling, and the board rose to their feet in applause. I stood there, letting that thunderous praise fill every crack in me their cruelty had once created. As the meeting ended, my brother-in-law approached, looking awkward in a way that was almost human. "Natalie," he said, clearing his throat. I'm grateful." I held his gaze, steady. "For what?" "For not destroying me," he admitted. "You could have." I nodded. "Yes," I answered. "I could have." He lowered his eyes, the weight of that truth heavy on his shoulders. "But sometimes," I continued, "the best revenge is watching someone learn." He looked up at me, eyes shining with something close to respect. "I won't forget it," he promised. I believed him. Walking back to my office, I felt a peace I had never known, the kind that comes after you burn your worst fears to the ground and build something beautiful in their place. My reign wasn't built on crushing others. It was built on reminding them and reminding myself that power belongs to those who refuse to bow. And tomorrow I'd keep proving it. The last day of the quarter arrived with a bright sky and a city humming with possibilities. I stood at the giant window in my office, coffee warming my hands, and let myself feel the quiet pride thrumming through my bones. This empire was mine, built not by stepping on people, but by refusing to stay down when they tried to bury me. Logan stepped in, beaming. "Natalie, it's time. Time for the employee celebration, something no director general before me had ever even considered. I decided every single worker, from the mailroom to the board, deserved to be honored for helping rebuild this place from the ground up. We gathered in the same atrium where my brother-in-law once ruled with fear. It was different now. Balloons, food, laughter bouncing off the marble walls. People smiling without dread. I took the microphone, scanning the faces of every single person who made this victory possible. "I stand here today," I began, voice steady, "not as a miracle, but as proof that no label can define you except the one you give yourself. Applause broke out, genuine, powerful. My brother-in-law stood to the side, head bowed, clapping along with everyone else. Humbled.
Changed.
And I let him stay, not out of weakness, but out of power. I finished my speech with a promise. This company will never again be a place where you are told you are less. It will never again turn away talent because of prejudice or pride. We will be a place that listens, that grows, that believes. The applause roared louder, people hugging, wiping away tears. And in that moment, I knew I'd done more than get revenge. I'd rewritten the rules. Logan joined me on stage, grinning, eyes full of pride. Director General, he teased, your legacy is going to be hard to beat. I smiled, a quiet, unbreakable smile. Let them try, I said. Because every time they tried to put me in a box, I would break it. Every time they tried to drag me down, I would rise higher. This was my world now, a world I'd earned with every scar, every breath, every refusal to quit. And nothing would ever take it from me again.